So we already have discussed about var variable, right? So the var keyword, how to declare identifiers with var keyword. So we have seen we can redeclare variables or identifiers with var keyword. At the same time, we can reassign. Suppose if we var x is equal to 10. Okay. So now if you see x is 10. Okay. If you want to assign some other number 40, you can assign. Okay. Now the value of x is 40. So that kind of reassignment is possible with var. Okay. And reassignment is possible with var keyword. And the identifier scope is function and global scope. That's what we discussed. And it is not block scope. That's also we discussed in yesterday's class. Okay. And the variables, the var variables are hoisted. Means that whenever the variable is declared, okay, at the bottom and is used on the top, in such a case, it is a kind of perception that the variable is already declared on the top and is assigned with undefined. Okay. So this is called hoisting. Okay. So up to this part we have discussed, and we did discuss scope chain and using use strict in order to stop the polluting global scope. That part we already discussed. Okay. Now today we are going to discuss another keyword, that is let keyword, the advantages or how it works in JavaScript, that we are going to discuss. Okay. So, but in order to compare what we discussed with yesterday's class, in today's class, I have mentioned what we discussed, um, what we already discussed here. Okay. So that we can compare if you want it. Okay. Now the let keyword. Okay. So if you see the let keyword, we know the var variables are hoisted. But when it comes to let variables also have a similar kind of thing, but it is not exactly hoisting. Okay. So let me show it to you. Let t. By default, I'm defining this variable in global scope. See, we have seen, okay, in case of var, we do see undefined, because what happens whenever JavaScript engine finds the var variables within the scope that it is executing, it pulls them top, only the declaration. Okay. So, and it would assign the variable, it would assign the data called undefined to that variable. We do see undefined, but when it comes to let, we don't see undefined being. But at the same time, what it does is that whenever JavaScript is executing a block of code, okay, a block of code, what it does is that it checks if there are any let, const, or class, okay, any classes with the help of class keyword. If there are any let, const, or class key related objects, then in such a case, it would create a temporal dead zone. Okay, that means that you cannot use any const or let. Again, I'm just giving example. Okay, so whenever it finds these kind of objects, it won't allow you to access within that block the scope. Okay, it creates a temporal dead zone. Okay, so when it comes to var keywords, it creates a variable hoisting. means that it creates a variable kind of thing on the top and it would assign undefined. But when it comes to these variable data, it would check the existence of these variables within that block, the scope, what it is executing. If it is a function scope, it checks within that function if there are any keywords or not, any keywords related data is there or not. If there is global scope, again, it would check the existence of these let const class keywords related data. If they are used before their declaration, then it would throw error that is related to reference error. And the uh, from top to bottom till the position where they are declared, this is called temporal dead zone. Okay, you are not supposed to use the let const class keywords before they are declared. It is called temporal dead zone. Okay, so the same point is applicable to const and class now, but we are not focusing on const and class. We are focusing on let. But as we are discussing about the temporal dead zone, that temporal dead zone is applicable to not only let, it is also applicable to const and class. You are not supposed to use the data that is related to the let, const, class keywords before their declaration. Okay, now, so this is called temporal dead zone, that is related to let. Not only let, it is also related to const and class. Okay, TDZ, we call. And another thing, let us is, sorry, let is block scoped. Let is block scoped, and it can be function scoped. It can be global scoped. The scope of let variable is, it can be a block, or it can be a function, or it can be global scope. Okay, here if you see the let keyword here in the line number 9, what we defined is, it is in the global scope. But the let that we are defining at the line number 12 is block scope. This is called a block. Okay, anything that is in between the snippet of code that is in between the curly braces is called the block. Okay, that is block respect to code. Okay, now I am saying T is block scoped now because it is defined with let keyword. Okay, so it is a global one. But here if you see the time when JavaScript is executing this code, okay, it is let, okay, let T is 10. Okay, it understood. Now, the time this code is executing, it checks if there are any let, const, or class keywords related data existed or not. If they are existed and they are used before their declaration, it would throw error. Is that clear?
So
Any
in the
doubts?
line number 11, it will throw error.
It will throw error. The reason is that block specific consideration JavaScript is considering here actually. So in the block, it does check before executing this code. It does check if there are any let, const, or class keywords related data existed or not. If they are declared and they are used before their declaration, in such a case, it would throw error. This is called temporal dead zone. So it would be applicable to block, it would be applicable to function scope, it would be applicable to global scope. So we have seen, okay, we have declared this one in the global scope and we have seen error being thrown. Now we are checking in this one, block scope. We do also check in the function scope. Okay. Cannot access T before initialization. Okay. This is called temporal dead zone. You may get this question. But even before getting this question, you understanding this concept is very important. So this is block respective. Okay. Now again, okay. The time when JavaScript, okay, JavaScript executes from top to bottom. Okay. So the time it says function, yes, function is there. Now it is function invocation. The time this function is invoked, it checks if there are any let, const, or okay, here um let me declare this one at the bottom. Okay, if you see here, even you declared the t variable. Okay, even you declare the t variable, it is not considering the upper scope. It is not trying to. It didn't try for the upper scope a t variable. If you remember, me see if you see, ideally what we can expect is okay, t already defined in the global scope, and the execution is in this way, right? So we can expect t being 10 here, but JavaScript won't do like that when it comes to blocks. Blocks, when the block came, it would check if there are any variables already created or not. Let const and class. Then it starts execution. Okay. 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 Now again. So for now, we can ignore this one. The same point is applicable here also. The time when JavaScript sees this code, so instead of directly executing, instead of in case of var variables, it would hoist right, but in case of let const class keywords, it would check their existence and it would check if they are and starts execution actually. Once the check is done, it starts execution. And if they are used before their declaration, it would throw error. Okay, that's how it is. You can't access state before initialization, right? This is called temporal dead zone. Okay, is that clear? Any doubts? So we have seen block respective, function respective, and global respective scopes. Any doubts? When it comes to var variables are not block scope. So they are function scope. Even if they are inside the, even if they are even if they are declared inside the block, we see undefined getting logged here. Because the reason is that var variables are not block scope, they are function scope. It would create var t by default value would be undefined. Okay. Now we see undefined being logged here. I'm sorry. But when it comes to let, there is no variable hoisting. Only the thing that happens is that it would check if there are any let const class keywords are there before execution. if they are existed and if they are made use before their declaration, then it would throw error. This is called temporal dead zone, and you are not supposed to use the let const class keywords related data before the declaration. Is that clear? Any doubts?
No.
Clear? Okay. So this okay. This point is
Yeah,
clear.
Bala. Yeah, yeah, Bala, I have a question.
Okay.
So we can do the same. I mean, where class. I mean, where keyword also we can use for declaration, right? I mean,
Can you
if you keep where variable or let keyword on the 10th line, what's the exact difference? I'm not getting. So even where also we can't access before
you tell me
declaration.
the code. You tell me the code so that I'll write. Tell me
So
what do you want me to write?
on 10th line, so on 14th, make it on 14th line where t instead of let t.
Okay. Where T?
Execute this one.
Okay. What should we get? Can anyone answer this?
Undefined.
Undefined. So we do get undefined. Okay. What's your question, Ashok?
Can you do make it let no?
Let. Okay.
Run the same.
Even it is not inside this block, even inside this function also, the same point is applicable. The same point. It is not just inside this function, even in global scope also, the same point is applicable. Okay. Okay. We do get error.
Okay.
See, what JavaScript is doing? JavaScript is trying to throw some errors actually. It is suggesting us to, okay, you are trying to use these identifiers before their declaration. In case of where, we haven't seen this actually. That is the issue. But in case of let const class keywords, we are seeing in prior. Okay, you are declaring. You are 1 second. You are declaring after their uses, or you are making use them, okay, before their declaration. That is wrong, right? So there is a this is the main use of let const and class keywords basically. Okay, the purpose of class and why they introduced class, that is different. Okay, but thing is that we are stopping one case here. We are not supposed to use a variable before its declaration. That is wrong, and we are getting error. So the ideal way is better to use let instead of where, because in case of where, the variable hoisting is happening. Okay, and the where is again not block scoped, but when it comes to let, it is block scoped actually. Okay, it maintains the scope within the block. Of course, we do see some examples so that we will know more about the block scope. Okay, is that clear?
Yes, Father.
Okay,
Thanks.
now no issues. Now if you see, let me pull this to bottom. So what can we see in log? Can anyone think? T variables are, they can be reassigned. They can be reassigned. By default, JavaScript engine would assign undefined value to the unassigned unassigned variables. See, here it is unassigned. This is unassigned. This is unassigned. Okay. Whenever JavaScript finds these kind of unassigned variables, these are declared variables, but there is no assignment of data to these variables. So by default, what it assigns is undefined. Means that not at any assignment happened. Okay. Any intentional assignment has happened so far. Okay. That's why we do see undefined for these three cases. See, your understanding is quite important. These are very, very basics and are very, very important. If you understand these today's class, you will be very, very stronger in JavaScript. Okay. So now let variables can be reassigned. Okay. So what is the possible logs that we can see for 14th line and 16th line?
Undefined 20.
Correct. So undefined and 20. Do not bother about this one. Okay. Do not bother about this one. Ideally, these are the two things that we have to check, and don't consider this one. Sometimes we do get some kind of numbers. Don't think about these actually. In different browsers, a different kind of data may throw. Okay. But don't consider it. So we have seen. So let variables are block scoped. Of course, we haven't seen examples on that, but we have seen. So that for let variables, the temporal dead zone would be created. Okay. And that let variables are not hoisted. Right? Okay. And they can be reassigned. Okay. Now, let us see some examples. So you cannot redeclare let variables. When it comes to var variables, you can redeclare. It gives us a false impression that the variable is not declared previously. But when it comes to let variables, it says you already created this variable, again you are creating. Okay. Let variables cannot be redeclared. It is an advantage actually. Okay. So let variables cannot be redeclared. Let me run this one. Has already been declared. Let variables cannot be redeclared. Be the first one to answer the questions. Be the first one to ask the questions so that you will be the first one to switch the company or to get the offer, I am sure. What would be the outcome? Just you are learning. Make
20.
mistakes. Yeah, very good. 20. Because let variables can be reassigned, right? Sometimes the errors are thrown due to the scope issue, global scope issue. Okay, ignore them. Trust your knowledge. Okay, 20 is the answer. So So what would be the answer? Think that T is not declared. I'm not sure whether the global scope contains T or not, but think that T is not yet defined, not yet declared. What would be the value?
Reference error.
Excellent. Very good. T already declared. So this is the application of what we learned actually. Okay, we are learning and we are applying. Okay, what would be the answer?
Same, uncut exception.
Reference error actually. Okay, difference in the sense it is trying to access T, but not a define. Again,
Yeah, again, same thing.
very good. So what's the value?
10.
N.
Correct. Mhm. Don't try to write this code that while I'm explaining. Okay, so you may miss the points which I'm saying. Okay, don't do that. You are learning here. Just try to learn. I'm giving more examples so that you will learn. If you understand the concept, you will learn. There is no doubt in that. So here we are declaring X in this block. So what is the value of X here and what is the value of X here and what is the value of X here? So the function gets called and this is how it is executed. This block of code gets executed first and then the log would happen. First
X cannot be redeclared, right?
X cannot be
Redeclared.
redeclared, correct. In a scope, in a given scope, X cannot be redeclared with let. In a given scope, here it is the block scope, here it is the function scope, here it is the global scope. In a given scope,
Okay,
let variables cannot be redeclared. So there are three scopes. One is block, function, and global scope. Check if a variable is redeclared in a given scope or not. So what are the values? I'm not sure. Let me explain you one thing. Okay. So here how execution happens actually. That time when JavaScript sees this code, this is the first line that gets executed, and it understands that this function is declared, but it won't execute. And it starts invocation of that function. It starts invocation of that function means it executes this code. Once this execution is completed, then comes to this line. Okay. So first this line of code executed and then this invocation is happening. So these lines of code gets executed, and then after this function is executed, this is the one that gets executed. Let us suppose if there is any other function inside of this one, let us suppose some okay. So this ff function I'm declaring again here. Okay. So it am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It will print as 12,
Okay.
12, 11, F, and 10.
And then
F12.
10. Correct. Okay. These logs also would be logged, right?
On 23rd. Yeah, it
So-
will print on 23rd.
So this is the one. First, F gets logged, and then 12 gets logged, and then 11 gets logged. After 11, FF gets logged, and then 10. This is the flow. Okay. Next already. Okay. F. First F. Because I'm invoking the function F. This is the first invocation that is happening. Okay. After F, 12, 11. Okay. This scope is getting executed. 12 is there. And then once it is done, 11. And we are invoking the function FF. This is logging this one. Okay. So this invocation, this entire execution is completed. Okay. Once it is done, it is logging the value of O. Okay. So here, okay, up to this is clear, right? Any doubts?
So why in the line number 14? So reference.
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
So I have declared X actually in the global scope.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So the X is already existed in the global scope. That's why I changed it to O. Okay.
Okay.
Now, if I rerun this code again, I see it throwing error because the O is already existed. Okay. So if I run the same code again, I'm not getting. I'm not digging into this. But thing is that if it is already existed, then we do see error being thrown. Okay. It is a kind of memory in the memory that is maintained in the browser itself. Don't put much focus on that actually. Okay. Okay. Up to this is clear, right? Any doubts?
Yeah, yes, it's clear.
Okay. Let me explain you. What is set timeout? Set timeout sets a specific function that we are giving to execute after specific time period. Only one time. Okay. Now, what I'm doing here, just remove this one. Okay. Let me take only this piece of code first. Let me explain. So here, these are milliseconds. So the second parameter that we are passing into set timeout is milliseconds. And the first parameter is the function. Okay. So you are saying, you are asking browser, hey, browser, I want to execute this function after 100 milliseconds. Okay, what it does is that it does after 100 milliseconds, it adds this function to event loop. Nothing but the queue actually. Okay, so once it is added, so based on the queue, first come, first serve actually. So the time it came, it gets executed. That is how it happens. Okay, and only one time it executes. Okay, but let me execute this one. So what is the possible log that I can see? Let us suppose I is not declared yet. Okay. What is the possible value that I can get?
Reference.
Yes, reference error. The reason is that we are trying to access this variable, but it is not yet declared, right? So we do get reference error.
So we get after 100 milliseconds or immediately we get?
We don't get immediately. We don't get immediately because the execution is not happening immediately.
Yeah, yeah.
The execution of this function is not happening. It is happening after 100 milliseconds. Okay. So the log
Got it.
the execution would happen after 100 milliseconds. So it may take 105 milliseconds because it depends on the stack again, the queue. Okay, if the queue already contains more functions to execute, then it may be some delay actually to execute this function, though it is part of the queue. Okay, and that is again advanced concept. I am not touching that one, but this function gets added to the queue after 100 milliseconds, and once it turns come, it gets executed. The time it is executed, it would check this variable is existed or not. It is not existed, so it is throwing reference error. Okay. Clear?
Yes.
Okay, now, so the first one is I. It is for loop. Okay, it is a loop. I am iterating how many times? 9 times. Okay, first 1, 2, and so on. The time 9 comes, yes, it is 9 is less than 10. Okay, let me explain. I'm not sure whether you know this syntax or not. First, this assignment would happen. Okay, this is initialization. It is not just this one. Even you can write some const p is equal to some. No. So that kind of assignment you can do here actually, but ideally we don't do that kind of complex functionality here. We simply initialize. We can access this one if you want to. Okay, but thing is that we don't do that. It is initialization, and this is the condition that is verified. Okay, first what happens is that this is initialized and the condition is verified, and this function is executed, and then the increment would happen. The condition would be verified, and if the condition is true, then the inner part is executed again. Okay, again, if it is executed, then it again increment would happen. So okay, if it is 8, okay, 8 is less than 10, then it again executed. I'm not saying about the inner function. I'm saying about this block of code, the function block of code. It is a block scope actually. Okay, this block of code gets executed whenever this condition is true. The time this condition is false, it won't execute it. It comes out of this loop. Okay, this is how it is. Now initially, the value of I is 1. Okay, now and I is less than 1 is less than 10. Okay, now it executes. Okay, this is one time that happens. Okay, it executes this one with the value 1. This function would be executed after 100 milliseconds. Now increment would happen. It becomes 2. 2 is less than 10. 2 is less than 10. So here it is 200 milliseconds, right? So here this is how it happens. But if you see, I'm not changing the value of I here. I'm changing the value of this one because it is directly accessible. The value of I, so the I is referenced inside this function. Okay, so but when it comes to this I, this is outside. We are passing it as input variable, actually input argument we are passing for this set timeout function. Okay, set timeout function is taking two things. One is the function, another one is some number, the number of milliseconds that it has to consider to execute this function actually. Okay, so here I am not changing the value of I. After some time, after 100 milliseconds, this function would execute this I. Okay, by the time, what is the value of I? By the time, what is the value of I? So because it is not block scoped, the var variable is not block scoped. So the time when this loop is completed, the value of var becomes, the value of I becomes 10. The value of I becomes 10. It is in the global scope. I'm executing this function in the, I'm executing this for loop in the global scope. So the var variable is being created in the global scope and the value is going to be 10. And after 100 milliseconds or after 200 milliseconds or after 900 milliseconds, the value of I is going to be 10. It doesn't know actually. It is not block scoped actually. Understanding my point? As it is not block scoped, it is only it is declared with var. That's why it is not block scoped. It is only function scoped or global scope. Here in this case, there is no function. It is a global scope. We are declaring I variable in global scope and initialized with 1 and it is becoming 10. Okay. So this part is done, but execution part is yet to be done. That execution part happens after 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, and 300 milliseconds, and so on, 900 milliseconds, right? So by the time the value of I is 10. So we do see 10 being logged 9 times. Are there any doubts in this?
10 being logged or like I value being logged?
What is the value of I? The value
So
of
it
I
will be
means,
1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. But this function is not executing itself now. It is a function scope, right? This execution is,
Yes.
it doesn't know. JavaScript engine doesn't know what is inside of it unless
Correct.
it tries to execute actually. So the time when it starts executing, it would try to fetch the reference for these variables. It is not before execution, it would try to check what variables are declared and where their references existed. That kind of thing is not, it won't happen actually before starting execution. The time when this function invocation happened, then only it would try to check the reference for these variables and the data for these variables are verified. Okay, it is not just by the time of declaration.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Again, do you have any questions? Any questions? So it is setting just this function, but engine doesn't know what is inside of it. It doesn't verify. It doesn't care actually.
Yeah, true.
It cares only the time it is starting executing.
Okay, so at that time, it won't be having I value, right?
1 second. Before executing this code, it does verify the kind of variables, let, where, const, classes, or it can be anything. It can be variable hoisting concept applied or temporal dead zone would be applied. Okay. So the time when it starts executing, before executing, it's that. Okay. Not just while the declaration, it would start checking all the variables inside of this function. Okay. Is that clear?
Yes, yeah.
DP, you were saying something.
Yeah, so now like after 100 milliseconds, like that would be automatically the function will be called, right? So
yes,
at that time, I value will be available or no, right?
if you see, where are we declaring this one? The for loop.
Yeah.
It is in the global scope.
Oh, okay.
What is the
So
value of-
directly we can execute the for loop like that?
Yes, we can. If you want to execute, you can execute.
Okay. Okay.
We can execute. Nothing is stopping us. So if there is a kind of requirement where you need to make asynchronous calls repeatedly for 2 or 3 times. Yeah. Actually, it depends on business need actually. Okay. I'm not
Okay,
going into
got
that,
it.
but
Yeah.
thing is that this code is running in global scope. Okay. So the
Yeah, got it.
the variable I is declared in the global scope. So what can be the value? What can be the values? I already explained, but if you have any questions, please ask me. Any question?
So, yeah, the question is like, so, after 100 milliseconds, the function will gets executing.
Wow,
So
yeah,
at
first
that
one.
time, do we have the I value or not? Is my question.
Okay, so I am saying I already declared var x some time back, right? I assigned 40 value, right?
Oh, yeah,
global
yeah.
scope,
Okay,
right?
yeah. Okay, yeah. So then, yeah, it would be available. I got your point. Okay, yeah, got it.
So as it is running in global scope, as long as the scope is existed, the data would be existed. It is in the global scope.
Yeah. So answer will be 10 times. It is going to print 10.
9
9
times.
times.
Yeah, 9 times.
9 times it is going to print 10, the value of 10. Okay?
Yeah.
Any doubts? This is the common interview question. This is the common interview question. So
Nice. Yeah.
think about
It's
interview
really
questions.
great point.
It is, don't think about interview questions. I want you to understand how to think so that the question may be altered later, right? So any questions? Okay. I haven't seen whether I ran it this one. Okay. If you see, the 10 is not logged immediately. It is not logged immediately.
Yeah, and it increased the count slowly. Yeah.
Slowly. See, 4, 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because 100 milliseconds, right? So 100, 200, 300, like that. It's happening. Okay, clear?
Yeah. Yes.
Bala, can you explain once again, please? Still, I'm thinking it should be, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4. Why it got 10 again?
Okay. So first thing is that where this variable is being created. So we are declaring with var. Okay. It would have only 2 scopes. One is global scope, another one is function scope. Okay. So are we declaring this for loop inside a function or in the global scope? So thing is that we are not defining in the function. It is in the global scope. Okay. So the var variables are scoped to global scope or function scope. Now the scope of this variable I is global. Okay. That is first point. So second point is each time this set timeout is called, because each time for each iteration, right, it is getting triggered. Okay. So it is taking 2 input parameters. One is function that is to be executed, but not getting executed now itself. It is to be executed after first 100 milliseconds. When I is 1, after 100 milliseconds, this function has to execute it. After 200 milliseconds, when I is 2, 2 is less than 100. So after 200 milliseconds, again, this function has to be executed. After 300 milliseconds, 400 milliseconds, this function has to be executed. So till we see this iteration till 9. Okay, again, after 900 milliseconds, this function has to be executed. Okay, now the value of I becomes 10 due to this increment, and it comes out of loop, and the value of I is going to be 10 now. Okay, the value of I is now 10. Still, these functions are not executed. So far, these functions are not executed. Now, JavaScript job is that it has to execute this function. Let us suppose if it has a name f, and now it has to execute this function f. Now it is executing this function. After 100 milliseconds, it executes this function. After 200 milliseconds, it executes this function. Right? What is the value of I after 100 milliseconds? What is the value of I after 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds?
10 only.
Ashok?
1, 2, 3 like that.
The value of I,
10.
the value of I is not being considered the time when we are passing this function actually. Okay.
Okay.
So this function, we are just passing this function, but JavaScript doesn't know, JavaScript engine itself doesn't know the value of I unless it tries to execute it. So the time when it tries to execute it, it tries to check the value of I. Okay. So,
Okay.
but the time when you are passing this function as an input variable, you are passing this function, right? At that time, it won't check the value of I because it doesn't know what is inside of this function. It is not trying to execute it. It is just trying to pass this function. It is just passing this function. It doesn't know what is inside of this function. After 100 milliseconds, okay, my turn came. Now I'm checking what variables are declared inside of it, what references I need to bring, and the data that I need to print, that kind of thing, that kind of validation happens actually. Okay. By the time that validation happens, it checks what is the value of I.
It is 10.
Right? Ashok,
Got
it doesn't pass. It doesn't pass along with I value. It doesn't pass along with 1 because JavaScript won't consider the inner part of this function unless it executes.
Okay.
Go through this video again. Okay, you will understand. Okay. If you still have doubts, we can discuss further. Okay.
So basically the for loop is executed within less than 100 milliseconds, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So that's why, yeah.
JavaScript is synchronous. At any time, it can handle only one specific code. It cannot handle multiple codes at a time. So it is not multi-threaded. Okay.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
So here I'm saying, let us suppose it is OO. My intention is to create a new variable. Okay. No. Let me explain you one more thing actually here. By default, whatever the function that you are passing here, if it is a function that is starting with a function keyword, there is another kind of function that is arrow function. Okay, we will discuss it later. But that time when you are passing this function with function keyword, okay, this would be executed in the scope of global scope. It gets executed in the scope of global scope. Whatever the function that you are passing to set time out, that function gets called in the global scope. So why global scope? The reason is that this function is getting executed now. Okay, this function is executed, the for loop is done, and the function gets logged, actually logged in the sense that is set to execute after 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, and some 900 milliseconds. But by the time the scope of execution of this function itself, the function f itself is done, there is no more the scope of this function actually, because we are not maintaining with any scoped variables, we are maintaining with var variables here. So if it is a block scoped variable, then in such a case we can think, okay, we are passing block respect to variable so that it can maintain the state, but we are not passing block respect to state actually, we are passing function scope respect to variables here. Okay, as we are passing function respect to, it is a function scope variable, and we are passing function respect to variable information into this block, right? So after some time, this function gets executed. By the time this function executed, it is a block, a function scoped variable, and the function itself is vanished actually. The block itself is not maintained actually. It is not related to the block. It is related to the function, and the function scope itself is done. That gets destroyed. Now it has to execute this function. Now it has to execute this function in the global scope. So global scope in the sense we are not passing any information that is respective to block scope, right? Let us suppose if you think, let t is equal to OO. Then it is block scope, right? So this data would be maintained and this function would be called in that block scope. But if we are not passing any block respective information, see, we are not passing block respective information, we are passing only the function scope respective information. So the time when we are passing function respective information, the function itself gets, it won't keep its scope actually. So the function itself is done. The function itself is done. Okay. Now, what is the value of I is going to be? What is the value of OO is going to be?
Same 9,
Yeah, same 10.
9, 10.
This function would be executing, one second. Okay. So again, we do see the scope of, the scope is maintained for the function scope, and the var variable is going to be up to that function, and that the function scope respect to variable is maintained till this part, but there is no any block respect to information. So if it is any block respect to information, that block respect to information is passed so that the state would be maintained. But here the function respect to information, if there is any global scope respect to variable here, like some where v is equal to 10, it doesn't consider if it is 10 or 9, whatever it is. Okay, it won't consider. Thing is that it considers up to this function scope, and the function scope, it gets destroyed actually. The function, it is done, this part is done, but the scope is just limited to this function, right? It is not related to the block scope. Okay, That's why we don't see again here the value of 1, 2, 3 or till 9 getting printed. Okay, is that clear? Any doubts?
So, suppose in the line number 12,
Hmm.
we created one variable, some xx equals to
What is the keyword you want to use?
where xx equals to v plus 1.
Where x is equal to
V plus 1.
v plus 1. Okay.
Now, in the set time mode function, if we print
Okay.
log xx, what will be the value?
So you are printing this xx, right?
Yeah.
So you are printing this xx. The value is going to be, initially it is going to be 2 and then it is going to be 10. Okay. The final value is going to be 10. When it comes to v, it is 9. Sorry, 9, right? 10. When it comes to v, it is 10. And when it comes to xx, it is also 10, right? So the time when it is 9, it gets executed and the value of xx is going to be 10. And the time when v is 10, it won't execute it. Okay. So the final value that we are going to see is
11.
10. So the value of xx is 10 here, right? If you remember, I said var variables can be redeclared. The var variables can be redeclared and the scope of the var variables is function scope. Okay. Even if you declare 10 times or 100 times, okay, it is a single variable that is getting created and the same variable getting reassigned. Okay. What is the value of xx going to be by the end of this iteration? The value of xx is 10, right? Do you understand my point?
It would be 11, right?
Yeah.
No, it won't be 11.
Is it? Last time, like when it is 9.
Last time it becomes 9, right? It is
9,
not 10,
then
it is 9.
no. That time, like that WE will be 10, right? When it is 9.
Yes, when it is 9, it becomes 9. Okay. So when the
Oh,
increment,
okay.
okay, if it is
Yeah.
10, in such a case, condition would be failed. When it is 9, it enters into this function, enters into this block. I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh, okay. Got it.
It is 9. 9 plus 1, 10. So the value of xx is 10, and it is a var variable that can be redeclared and it can be reassigned, and the value and the scope of this var variable is function scope, and we are seeing the value 10 as the by the time that this function is getting executed, right?
Yeah,
So
got it.
what can be the value that is going to be then? Can you guess? The person who asked this question.
10.
Simply apply
9.
your concepts. That's it. Just apply your concepts. You can answer any question. Okay. Any doubts?
Okay. If you have the line number 12 inside of the set time mode function,
Okay. Very nice.
now
Mm-hmm.
the value would be 9.
So what is the value of v going to be by the time this function is getting executed? It's going to be
9.
10, right?
9.
No, not 9. It is going to be, if it is 9, it executes this block of code, okay? And then it becomes 10. 10 is
Okay.
not less
Right.
than 10, okay? It comes out of this one. After
Okay.
100 milliseconds, I'm sorry, after 100 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds, after 900 milliseconds as well. Okay, we do see the value of V is going to be 10, right? So the
Yeah.
time this is getting executed, it is 10 plus 1, 11, right? Any
Yeah.
doubt?
Okay. No, clear.
Clear.
So,
Very good.
and one more question. So in the
Okay.
line number the 13, instead of XX, if we reassign the value of a V, I mean V equals to V plus 1, then in that
Okay.
case it will increment.
You are saying V is equal to V plus 1. Okay. So each time, here, what are you going to log? Are you going to log V or what?
V only, yes.
V, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So again, after in the first, by that, okay, we have seen it gets iterated for 9 times. Okay. 9 functions have to be triggered. First function has to be triggered after 100 milliseconds. Second function, 200 milliseconds. Third function, 300 milliseconds. After 900 milliseconds, the 9th function would be executed, right?
Yeah.
By the time first function to be executed, the value of V is going to be 10. Okay. So we are making the value of V to
10.
11.
Next time, yeah.
Yeah, we are making it to 11, right? So the value of V is going to be 11 in the first case, right?
Yeah.
So the value of V is again function scoped. It is not related to any block scoped actually. Okay.
Yeah.
Now it is 11, and then for the next iteration, for the time for the second function, after 100 milli, I haven't tried this actually. It's a very good example. So I'm just applying my understanding. So now it is after 200 milliseconds, the value of V is going to be 11. Okay, 11 plus, because already first function got executed, right?
Yeah. Good.
Right. So the value of V is going to be 12, and then 13, 14, like that it has to log. Right? Let us check. Okay.
Yeah, it's nice. Good example, really.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Because this kind of getting into the code and understanding why and what is very, very important. That makes you expert actually. Okay. So I'm giving you this one. So what's the value of, what is the value that is getting logged? It is a block scope. So for each block, the state of I is different actually. That maintains actually. For each block, for each iteration, the value of I is maintained. The value of I is maintained, so that whatever, so that the function, it may be triggered after 1 hour or 2 hours, after 10 days or 100 days. It doesn't matter. The state of the I is maintained. Okay, if it is 1, the block respective state is maintained, and the value of I is going to be 1, and 2, and it's going to be 2, and 3, and 3. The value of I is going to be 3. Because the reason is that it is block scoped. It is not global scope variable. Okay. So this function would get executed within a specific block that is having the variable I. Okay. This is an implicit closure actually, because the function is able to access its outer scope variables. That kind of scope the let keyword is creating when it comes to block. I'm repeating again. Here the function is able to access its outer scope. The outer scope is the block scope. A block scope contains a variable called I, and it would maintain its state. My statement clear?
Yes.
So if you see after 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, we do see the respective exact value being logged. Okay. So if the common interview question is, so how can you fix this one? Okay, what is the value of this one? Okay, I want these kind of values to be logged. How can you do that? You can make it block scoped actually. Why? What happens if you make it block scope? Because the block maintains the state of the variable I. Each block 9 times, sorry. Each block would have maintained its own I value by the time this function is executed. You know the scope chain, right? Within this function, the value of the variable I is not defined. It would verify its upper scope. Upper scope is the block scope. Here, the block scope variable is I. Its value is, for the first function, it is 1. For the second function, it is 2. And the third function, it is 3. Okay. So each time this function is getting executed, it checks that variable is declared inside this function or not. Okay, it is not declared and it is not available inside this function. And it checks in its upper scope. Okay, in its upper scope, the value of I is 1 when it comes to the function that has to be invoked after 100 milliseconds, and 2 when it comes to the function that has to be invoked after 200 milliseconds, and 9 for the function that has to be invoked after 900 milliseconds. Okay, this is how it is. So that's it. I have taken more time. Okay, it's a very nice session. I enjoyed specifically. Okay, we will connect tomorrow. Thanks for your time.
Just one question.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
What's
So, in the line number 9, if we initialize the value I, so
what is that?
will that behave?
Let or where?
Let with let only.
Let. You are making global variable.
So
Let I is equal to
1.
100. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
here
it is a global variable. It is a block variable. Here this I is a block variable.
Okay.
Okay.
So
You know the answer. Do you have any questions? It's already declared actually. So let me
assign some let x equals to I.
Let x is equal to I. Okay.
Yeah. No, not here. Sorry. Let x equals to 1.
Okay.
In the line number 9, let x equals to 1.
Okay.
And we'll assign let z equals to x. Let I equals to x.
Where?
In the line number 10, let I equals to x.
Is equal to x. Okay. Is this?
Yeah, this will also run the same. Yeah.
Log the same. The reason is that
Yeah.
goes by value, not by reference. Okay. Okay. Any questions? Okay, team. Okay. We'll connect tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.